The mission of the Clarke Historical Museum is to celebrate the rich and varied history of Northwestern California by preserving, sharing, and interpreting that history in ways that increase knowledge, engage the mind, enrich the spirit, and stimulate the imagination.
My name is Jasmine Brown, and I am the Nealis Hall Registrar Curator at the Clarke Historical Museum. I'm here today with Shirley Laos. Shirley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Ayakwi, Neknau Shirley, Torthker, Essie Uskurwich Mate Wumachoth, Chure, Trinidad Rancheria Kichakwe Ka, and they taught Mayor Yurok Kuruk Essie Chetko, Skui San Ninapek. I said, hello, my name is Shirley. I come from the sites of Torthker and Uskurwich, both along the Klamath River, and I live at Trinidad Rancheria now, and I'm Yurok Kuruk and Chetko, and I said, I'm happy to be here with you today.
Lovely. Thank you, Shirley. All right, we're going to start our discussion today off with how long has your family lived in Humboldt and where?
Well, forever, because all four of my grandparents are native, with other people married in, but the base is all the local tribes that I mentioned, all from this region.
Very nice. What was family life like for you growing up?
Well, I was born at Hoopaw, on the Hoopaw Reservation, which is directly adjacent to the Yurok Reservation, where my grandparents and my extended family lived. And so for the first 5 or 6 years of my life, we lived at Capel along the Klamath River near Witchpeck. And so we spent a lot of time with extended family, my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and cousins, and just hung out with, all the other kids in the area, and played outside almost every day because there was neighbors, but all the neighbors, were kind of spread out far. So we had a lot of place to play and just being outside all the time.
That sounds great. So you guys played outside a lot. Was there anything in particular you guys did outside? Or do you have any games or anything that you guys
yeah. So, sure. Right after that, we moved to Trinidad, and that's when I became enrolled at the Trinidad Rancheria. So we, again, had a lot of space to play outside, and I have, there's 7 kids in my family, so we had plenty of playmates all the time. We climbed trees, so we would climb to the top of the fir trees that were around. And now I look back and look at the height of those trees, and I think, how did we even think we could do that? But we were up there all the time. And then one day, my brother was at a different area and some different trees that was on a hillside. And he showed us how to jump onto the outside of the limbs and then just cascade down to the ground. And that was pretty fun. I don't think us girls would have thought about it on our own, but my brother did all kinds of things like that. And so he showed us. And the first time we did that, it was a little bit scary, but it was so easy. And you just held onto the boughs and on the outside of the tree. And, as it slanted outwards and came closer to the ground, then you just stepped off and there you were. So I don't think my mom ever knew we did that.
Probably not. Yeah. Did you or anyone in your family weave baskets growing up?
Well, my grandmother was an everyday weaver. She was an expert weaver. She spoke fluent Yurok. Her mother was full-blooded Yurok, and so their first language was not English. they
Mhm.
learned when they went to school. So I was always around basketry, but since we moved to Trinidad and my grandmother still lived at Pequon on the Klamath River, we weren't with her on a daily or weekly basis. So I didn't get to weave with her, but when we were visiting, she would always take us with her gathering. So I did get to gather with my grandmother when we were kids. And the thing that I remember most is she was always ahead of all of us kids. Climbing up a steep hillside, she was ahead of us. Walking through, the forest, yeah, she was way ahead of us. It's that because that was just her life,
Mhm.
and us kids had to keep up. Usually,
Right.
kids are running ahead of the adults, and not in this case. My grandma was always ahead because she was just a doer.
Yeah.
And she would just get it done, and what she needed, she would go and get it. But those are some of my earlier memories of spending, holidays or summers, weekends, and stuff like that. And my grandma would um, just take us along whenever she was, doing gathering. And I remember when I made my first basket with a different teacher, but I went to my grandmother to have her help me finish it off at the very end because I didn't know how to do the ending. And so I took it to her to have her help me do that. So there was some basketry with her, and I did inherit a few of her baskets, so I'm happy for that. So she was a big influence, even though I didn't get to learn at her knee, like, as if we lived next door.
Mhm. What
So
was your
when I,
grandma's name?
pardon?
What was your grandma's name?
Oh, I should have introduced that at the very beginning when I was doing my own introduction.
No
My
worries.
my maternal grandmother, I'll walk Dorothy Van Pelt Green, and my grandpa's I'll walk Ted Green, and my dad I'll walk Andy Lewis, and his parents I'll walk Andy Senior and Rose Ludington Lewis.
Lovely.
So they're the ones I mentioned earlier that all were natives from this area. And so a lot of history, a lot of stories growing up. Uh, yes, all kinds of stories were told. So that's another thing that as kids, we would just sit and listen to all these different stories, some cultural stories and others just stories about, people, what they
Mhm.
did, funny things or just experiences
Yeah.
around all the neighboring people.
Do you have one that you remember today that's a favorite, or is it sort of just you remember those times of sitting and talking together?
There's a couple that are favorites, but they have bits and pieces that I probably wouldn't want to say on record.
Oh, that's
Those kind of stories.
Oh, it's always fun with family though.
Yes.
So Shirley, you've been gathering basket materials for the majority of your life then, since you were gathering with your grandma when you were a child, right?
Yes. And after I was an adult, my grandmother passed away early. She had diabetes.
Oh.
And so I took a class and started up weaving again. And then when I went to HSU, Susan Burdick was teaching a class, and so I signed up for that too. And so learned a lot more through Tweet and went on many gathering trips with her. So it's just a relearning and a continuation, and then learning new things. With different teachers, different people. Everything that I learned, I try to pass on to my family, and I take my sisters and nieces, and now my grandchildren and great nieces and nephews. I always take them with me gathering, and they can learn what they want, and I just encourage them. And some of them go on to weave, and some of them don't, but they all have a role and they all have an opportunity to participate. So I think that's just as important because gathering is a family activity. You don't do it by yourself, and it's just more fun and safer too to go out gathering in a group.
For people who are unfamiliar with basket material gathering, sort of what does that look like? Do you do it seasonally? Do you have certain spots you like to go? Different things like that?
Yes, everything grows in its season, so you need to be aware of when things are ready to be picked. Some things are more specific, like sticks. So, like willow sticks, there's a more narrow window when you can pick those in the spring when they're just starting to bud. So you have to go and check a couple of times to see if they're just right. Whereas other things, you have a larger window, maybe a month or 6 weeks that you can pick all during that time. So, like woodwardia fern in the early fall, late summer, early fall, you have a bigger window to pick. So you can go more at your convenience, but they still need to be ready. The weather plays a part in when things mature enough to be gathered. Last year, I saw the biggest impact of weather on woodwardia fern. Last year was really different with heat and then the really stormy winter in many years. And I went to gather some woodwardia fern, and in September, which is usually a really good month for that, and they were all really short and small, and they didn't, because woodwardia can grow to several feet in height. They're usually taller than I am, and they were only 3 or 4 feet tall. They barely got to my shoulder, and I thought, this is really odd. So I picked a few just for a demonstration, and I said, I'm going to come back in another month. So it was early October, and I went back, and they had grown more, and so they were more at their regular height. But we picked. Usually, you have to stop picking in mid-October because it depends on the first hard frost is when it would actually they'd go dormant for the season. So the climate change, at first I didn't think it was impacting too much the first couple of years after we heard about climate change or studied it more, but this last year I really saw the impact for myself for the first time. And then last year also I saw an impact with beargrass. Usually you pick beargrass in the summer, so in July, August, that type of the month, and it should be burned, the year before. So there was a forest fire, so we knew it was burned. So we went to the spot, and again, it was really small. So I thought, well, maybe it was the same impacts, from the climate, or maybe it was just the severity of the fire. I'm not sure, but I went back in September, and usually the beargrass is already gone. It's gone dormant by then, and it had grown even more.
Oh,
And we
wow.
got some really big, good bundles of long beargrass into September. And I thought, this is just really unusual. So you just have to go out there, be on the ground, check. If it's not ready, you have to go back. Or sometimes you can miss the window,
Right.
and then you might have to be just picking some smaller stragglers, that aren't optimum, but they're still workable. So you have to just go out there and know where you go. There are places I go back to. Some of the places that Tweet showed us, some of them my niece and I found on our own. Things change over time, so you might have to change your spot that you go to. You just have to kind of hike around and find where the good materials are, and um, not pick it all. Make sure that you just pick enough for your uses, and also to leave enough for other people to come and pick, because they might be going to the same spots because you're out there all at different times.
Right. Good to have a code of ethics sort of to work off of, even if it's just sort of your own moral code that you've created or one that's shared with everybody in the gathering community.
Right. It is taught to you and shared by the gathered community. And some people have songs that they sing to the plant, specific plant songs. I don't know any myself, but I have heard other people singing them. But everybody can offer an offering or just a simple prayer when you gather, to thank the plants and thank nature and just to be in that good thought
Yeah.
process and just to be in a good attitude.
That's beautiful. Well, speaking of changes, like you were talking about with the seasons changing from just year to year, what about Humboldt County has changed since you were a kid?
Well, one big change, Highway 101 went in.
Oh, yeah.
So portions of it were already there. And of course, I'm talking about the newer 4-lane Highway 101 because it was a 2-lane smaller road. Highway 101 existed.
Mhm.
But after we moved to Trinidad, the 101 construction began. It was right in our backyard. So in the evening, after they put all their machinery away and we could hear it, go silent, we would go out there and play in all the dirt. So we played on the base of Highway 101 before they paved it when it was still just fresh dirt.
Oh,
So
neat.
that was one big change. And I,
Yeah,
still remember, I mean, all that fresh dirt just is attractive to kids.
absolutely.
And then in some ways, Humboldt County hasn't changed too much,
Mhm.
but in other ways, yeah. So there are more people, more housing. We used to go to the beach all the time, and then now there's houses, next to the beach in some areas where so you can't access the same areas that we did when we were kids. But so I would say, more people moving here and a lot more housing.
Mhm.
But a lot of it, hasn't changed.
Yeah, Humboldt has a way of doing that where as much as things change, a lot of things stay the same, especially the
Right,
major parts of our landscape that just don't change.
right.
Um, well, going backwards in time a little bit, did the 1964 flood or any other floods for that matter affect you or your family?
Oh yes, the 1964 flood affected my family big time because it destroyed their house.
Oh, wow.
They lived right on kind of a medium-sized bluff above the Klamath River near Pequon. And when the 64 flood came, it rose so high that it filled the first story of their 2-story house. And it
Wow.
washed away their outbuildings. They had a boat building workshop. They built boats for the use on the river. My great uncle was a master canoe builder in our family. So they had a pretty big operation of building boats right next to their house. All that was washed away.
Wow.
And so they had to tear down their house because the first floor was so damaged with the water and the silt that it couldn't be saved. The second floor was intact, but they ended up having to tear the entire house down, and it changed the landscape pretty severely. So they were relocated up on the hillside, far
Okay.
above the river. So it um, and it also impacted uh, their jobs because most of my uncles and my grandpa, they all worked in the lumber business at that time, and they used to work on the log rafts that were sent down the Klamath River.
Right.
After that, they didn't really do that anymore. I think because the river changed so much, and it probably didn't have any depth for those logs to make it through with all the silt buildup. And another way that it really impacted my family in a big way A little bit further downriver was where my great grandmother came from. Her name Awak Daisy Yakta Van Pelt. Her um, traditional home site, and they had a stick-built house and a plank house there at their home site, and a family cemetery. And it was on a big wide flat. And the flood was so big that it wiped out that entire flat, washed away their houses, and it partially washed open the cemetery.
Wow.
So um, my ancestors that were buried there had to be relocated. Luckily, they hadn't washed away,
Mm-hmm.
so it was able to be rectified. So they were relocated. So I'll walk to all those people.
That's definitely a big impact on everyone's life, from your house even all the way through to your ancestors being disturbed. I'm glad they were able to be reinterred.
Yes.
All right, our final question for you, Shirley, is why does history matter to you?
I've always loved history. It's always my favorite subject in school. I've always read a lot.
Mhm.
I really like to read historical fiction because you have the novel story part of it, then you have all the learning on the historical part of it,
Right.
and I just have to trust the author that they did accurate research. But I do like to read historical novels. I just it was just part of my personality that I liked history, and so that carried over into my adult life. I
Mhm.
am a lifelong learner. I always want to learn new things. I've never changed in that respect.
Mhm.
Plus, being a native, you just, and especially here, and having all of my grandparents being native, and other people marrying in. The William Van Pelt who married in was a Dutch person, so it's
Mhm.
interesting, to learn about him, to find out information. But being born and raised here and not having ever moved away and having all my family still here, you're more closely connected to your history.
Right.
And it's the living history part of it, it's closer to you. And I like to think about when I was a child, my great grandmother was still alive. So I knew her and I was able to interact with her, and I have some good memories of her. And to me, I always thought of that at the time. Maybe I didn't synthesize it like I do as an adult, but I was aware on some level that she was a living link
Right.
because I knew they had a plank house and a stick house.
No.
I knew she spoke Yurok and I knew she wove baskets.
Mhm.
And I knew that, she didn't speak English and her life was changing. And she was living through, some major changes,
Absolutely.
or, had lived through it in her younger years. But she was a living link to us kids. And so now that I'm an adult and I can think back on that, it's even more profound, that link. So I think that probably just subconsciously put me on the path to history and everything, learning and wanting to know and just being interested.
Mhm.
And, besides, it's my family. So I have that, double connection. So I think that's what history means to me and why I'm so interested in it now.
That's lovely, Shirley. Yeah, we can definitely see through your work here at the museum, of all your volunteering during Arts Alive demonstrations and things, just how connected you are to your history, how inspired you are from your upbringing, from your grandmother teaching you to gather, all the way through to you now carrying that to your granddaughters, your grandnieces and nephews, your children and your family, and just sort of being that link for them that she was to you.
Yeah,
She's now.
yeah, that's true. And speaking of that link and the Clarke, I really enjoy working in Nealis Hall, just being around, our baskets and such. But on a practical level, uh, I think us Native people who have been on the board, in the recent past, or involved as volunteers, we have made a good difference teaching and educating the other board members, participating in sharing with staff.
Mhm.
And I think one of the really good things that we've done recently was to put some spiritual care protocols into place for the regalia and the baskets in Nealis Hall. So they're aired out. We have root burned, in there. Well, we have people come in and sing songs, basket songs for them. So to educate and let the rest of the board members understand how that's important, and then for them to agree and to put it into the uh, written protocols for Nealis Hall was a big step. And I
Mhm.
think that's important to get back to traditional care, not just museum care, but traditional care of the items, and to take care of them in the old way.
Right.
So I think that's a one huge step. And there's many other things that we've been able to do with the board and staff. So I think it's always a growing experience, and if people are open to learning about the past and changing, current um, work, that it'll work for everybody and everything.
Yeah.
And so with that, I would like to say that my granddaughter comes and helps me volunteer at the Clarke. She asked to come with me when she was 5. Now she's 11, and she's been coming with me ever since. So she's learning not only about the culture, but about the museum too. So
Absolutely.
she tells people she works at the Clarke Museum,
She completely does.
like it's her employment.
She'll put it on her resume one day.
Yes. That's important. Everything I do with the kids, I do it with an eye towards they can use it for their resume. And I've written job references for um, my kids that have worked with me for many years. And so when they look for their first job, I've written them letters of recommendation of the things that they've learned while they're doing cultural activities.
Well, you're a great teacher, Shirley.
Well, thank you. Walklow.
Do you have any final thoughts before we close out here?
No, just
Okay.
that I really enjoy working at the museum, and always happy to help out there.
Well, we appreciate all of your contributions so much, from doing demonstrations at Arts Alive to helping coordinate this event for us today, to everything that you do, just offering us support and care. It's really, there isn't really a way to express how appreciative we are of you.
Oh, Walklow. It's just in my heart.
And me personally, you do a lot.
Yeah.
But it helps me a lot. And I treasure our time that we have together.
Thank
So
you, Walklow.